So we're here live, Fischler College of Education, School of Criminal Justice, hosting a really fantastic Facebook Live tonight with a missing person podcast host, Ed Denzel. The name of the podcast is Unfound. And let me just tell you, I'll tell you a little bit about Ed for a minute. Ed is a investigative journalist, former screenwriter, actually probably current screenwriter and actor. He has dedicated his career to investigating missing person cases. And tonight we're going to focus on a missing person case of Dory Ann Myers, who was last seen on January 10th, 2006 at a bar in Vero Beach, where witnesses say she left with two men. And later that night, a fire gutted her house. Her car was also burned and found 80 miles away in Glades County. No one has seen or heard from her since. So we're going to talk tonight from various perspectives. My name is Dr. Grace Telesco, and I am with the Fischler College of Education and School of Criminal Justice, former law enforcement, 20 years, spent with the NYPD, retired at the rank of lieutenant, was a first responder at Ground Zero, and spent the last year of my career doing that work and working directly with families, the families of the victims. So, Ed and I have a lot in common. With no further ado, we're gonna turn it over to Ed. He's gonna introduce himself a little bit more. He's gonna tell you a little bit about his work, and then he's gonna dive right into the case. And then we'll have an opportunity to talk about the case a little bit, maybe from a chronological perspective, maybe from the psychological perspective. And then, we'll go back and forth talking about how this applies to some of our programs and here at NSU in the School of Criminal Justice. So, Ed, it's all you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks. Thanks for the introduction. It's good to finally talk to you. We were supposed to do this at the beginning of April, and then a virus got in our way. Who would have thunk it, right? Who would have thunk it? We could have never predicted that. But it's finally good to talk to you, even though it's just across the internet. Maybe we will get to meet one day in person.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I've been doing Unfound for about 3.5 years. The first episode came out on September 2nd, 2016. Since then, we've covered 169 disappearances, but we've also done some other episodes. I think we're just under 200 episodes, for the program. I started the program myself, but over that time of the last 3.5 years, I've had some people come on to the program and assist me. I call them my assistants. Their names are Emily, Cherie, Carrie, Heather, Eric, and Natasha. And they help me behind the scenes. They all have their different roles, and I'm so happy to have them too. So this is not a one-man operation. I may do the interviews, and I'm the guy that's on camera and everything, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes by people other than myself. And missing persons cases, true crime, it's always been an interest of mine going back. I'm going to be 50 this year. But I remember back in the 1970s watching the show In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy. I kind of look back at it now. The show's a little bit cheesy, but as a 7-year-old or something, it was like fascinating. And then into the 80s with cops, with unsolved mysteries. I can remember going to my friends. Their father was a part-time police officer, and he had a scanner in the house. So I can remember sitting by the scanner, and I loved to listen to what was going on, out, in the surrounding county, surrounding area. And so I've always been interested in that, but it wasn't until, 2016 where I could really make something of it. Of course, I kept up on disappearances and other things, did a lot of reading and going to websleuths.com, websites like that. But it wasn't until 2016 that I was able to put this program together.
That's great. That's great. And I know, and you mentioned that we were supposed to do this live. Well, we are doing it live anyway.
Yeah, we're live. Oh yeah, we're live. We're just not in person. Yes.
That's great. You were going to drive bless your heart. You were going to drive all the way from the other coast to be with us.
Yeah.
But we have this thing, NSU. We call ourselves sharks, right? So we're sharks. We don't let anything stop us. So I'm glad that we're able to do it, and I really want to dive right in. So just tell us a little bit about the work itself, and maybe why you've selected this particular case that you'd like us to talk about tonight.
Sure. Dorianne Myers is a disappearance that I've known about for a long time, even before I started the program. I'm not sure why that is, but I ended up. It's a kind of a unique story. I treat all of the disappearances the same. I don't care how old the disappearance is. I don't care what the person was doing with his or her life. I don't care. We talk to anybody. But the reason I picked out Dorianne's is because it is a Florida disappearance. It happened just a couple hours from where you are right now, north of you in Vero Beach. And so I'm hoping that, when people see this show that we're doing now, this interview, that they might get motivated down in that area, to take a deeper look at this disappearance that's now over 14 years old. I would draw a comparison to what is going on in New York with the disappearance of Suzanne Lau, which is a disappearance that is 22 years old now. And there's a college up there that found out about her disappearance. And now the college students, as part of the curriculum, they work on her disappearance. And that's been going on for a couple years now. That was the first disappearance I ever covered for Unfound. So I'm hoping by talking about Dorianne Myers that maybe we can get some people in your area, maybe at your school, some students, get something started there. We'll just have to see. Of course, that's totally up to you. But, that was my thinking in, picking her disappearance.
Yeah, that's
regarding her, regarding her disappearance is that I started talking to her sister, Donna Jean, if you can believe this, in like November 2016. And she always said she was going to come on the program and then kind of put me off. And, I kept coming back to her, Donna Jean, I really want to, really want you to be on the program. I think that it'd be good for, the case. And finally, she decided after, 2.5 years, last summer in 2019, she finally decided to come on the program. And then that's when we did the interview. Unfortunately, Donna Jean died October of last year. I think she had some health problems for quite a while. It may actually be the reason that she came on the program when she did. I think maybe she thought that her health was failing and she better do it now before she couldn't do the interview at all. So it's very possible. That's just a guess. But she was her sister Dorianne's biggest champion. And so I feel like Unfound and everybody else now needs to pick up, where she left off. And so you're right. In describing some of the facts of her disappearance, Dorianne went out. She was planning to go to a poker tournament, and she got there, I guess, a little late, and all the tables were full. It was like a local tournament at a bar or something like that. She went to another place. That place was full, and she ended up at this third place. And probably, I'm thinking unexpectedly, that's the way I remember it, she got home early. And what happened was she had an ex-boyfriend. His name was Joe. And he called her at approximately 9:30 on January 10th. And she said that she was already home and that there were 2 guys with her and they were military veterans. And Dorianne Myers was very much into military vets, support groups, things like that. And so that was not too surprising. And then what happened was that they hung up. And at 2 a.m., so that would now be into January 11th, the neighbors heard something going on next door. They look out. They see Dorianne's car speeding away. They don't see who's driving. They don't really know what to think. And then an hour later, her house is on fire. And the fire department shows up. They put out the fire. The house is gutted. The outside of it looks fine. In fact, you can look at it on Google Street Maps to this day. The outside is fine, but the interior was pretty much destroyed. The Dorianne's remains were not found in the fire, although her pets were. I believe she had a cat and a dog, and they were found burned to death. And so what then happened was later that morning, then her car was found, as you stated, in Glades County at a boat ramp, and it had also been burned as well. And what's interesting about that is that it was called in by somebody. Somebody noticed the car burning, but it's kind of out at this boat ramp. It's not around any buildings or anything. And the fire department got to it so quick that the car was still burning when they got there. So whoever put it on fire, it must have been like right before it was called in, which that's something that people can think about. And Dory wasn't in the car either, and there was no evidence leading to actually what happened. The police initially thought that this was all the work of Dory herself, even though there's nothing that Donna Jean and I ever talked about that she had any psychological issues or mental issues or struggled with depression or PTSD, anything like that. She never talked about running away, nothing. But the police initially thought that. But then they ended up talking to the ex-boyfriend who told them about this call that he had made to her. And then that's when the police started poking around. They went to that bar, and that's how they got the description of these two men that I've sent the pictures to you, and they're, of course, posted a lot of different places now, like on charlieproject.org for her case. And this is the description people at that bar that night gave. One man is white, Caucasian. The other one is Hispanic. These two men, to this day, 14 years later, have never been tracked down. And that's where, the case pretty much sits. Those are the general facts of her disappearance. In talking to Donna Jean, if people were to go back and listen to that interview that I did with her last summer, certainly some other things came out of it that, could point you to a couple different directions as to, what happened. Did this happen? Did that happen? Did these guys do something to her, or did somebody else do something to her? So there's I've sent you pictures of the interior of the house, how some things were burned and some other things weren't. And so it lends itself to a really good examination because there is so much information on this particular disappearance, probably more information than probably 90% of the disappearances we cover on the program.
You know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to just share my computer screen for a second so that folks who are watching can take a look at this. So this is one of the pictures that you sent me.
That's right.
And if you want to describe this to the audience.
Yes, I will. This is Dorian's bedroom. And I think what you should notice from this, I'm by no means a fire expert. I just want everybody to know that right now. But the way Donna Jean explained it, being that Donna Jean was there and saw this in person, is that you'll notice that half of the bed is burned and the other half is not. You can see the far end of the bed at the headboard is all black, whereas the part on the left side of the screen is not burned at all. And that was you'll see that kind of throughout the house, where some things are very burned and some things aren't burned at all. In fact, her phone, she did, if we're to believe that Dory left or whatever we believe, her phone, cell phones are plastic. Cell phone wasn't damaged at all. There was a camera inside her house, also plastic, did not melt. They got the pictures out of it. So it was just odd in how the place was burned. It was definitely arson. There was definitely an accelerant, most probably gasoline. I think that makes the most sense. But yeah, that's what they're seeing in this picture. That's what her looked like.
Right. So, and I'm going to come back to the other pictures of the suspects. Was her body? Can you talk about whether her body was ever found, any remains or anything like that?
No. On Unfound, we don't do any cases where remains have been found. Everything that we cover is no remains have been found, although we have covered at least one disappearance where a person had already gone to jail and served his time for a disappearance, even though the body had still not been found. That would be the disappearance of Angie Arnell. But we do disappearances where no remains have been found. So no, in her case, nothing.
So tell us about this picture.
This is her kitchen, and once again, you'll notice that some things are burned and some things aren't. What Donna Jean also pointed out in knowing her sister the way she did is that the house seemed to be a little bit of a mess. And that was not the way that Dorianne typically kept her house. She lived there by herself with her pets. She's 43 years old. And there were things out. There were cigarette butts in places that she would never keep them. I forget if she was a smoker herself or not, but I don't think she ever smoked in the house. She was very neat. And that was not the way the house was when they showed up. And this was not a factor of the fire itself. This was something that must have gone on the night that all of this happened. So, or somebody maybe, if you want to get into that, go in that direction, maybe somebody made it look like that. But yeah, that is her kitchen, and you'll see that the fire hit some things, but not other things. This is a living room, pretty much destroyed. And if you see the way I remember it, if you're looking at the door in the back left corner, I believe that is the room where her pets were found. The door was shut and locked. And so did she put her pets in there because these guys were over? Was she afraid that one of her pets would attack one of these guys? Or did somebody lock those pets in there, hoping that they would die in the fire? You can, once again, you can interpret it a few different ways, but what the fact is that those pets were in that room, could not get out, and that's the reason they died in the fire. Yes, this is an area in Glades County. I've never been there. I've never been to Vero Beach either, but you will see her car in the bottom right-hand corner. You can see the boat ramp where that white pickup truck is, and there's all those cars lined up on the left side, I believe, are all law enforcement or fire department vehicles, people who showed up. If you were to look at a satellite map of this, you would see that, yes, you can see those kind of buildings in the background and everything, but there are no buildings around, this car. We're still not sure, at least Donna Jean didn't know, who actually called the burning of this car in. But I think what is most important is that the fire department got there and the car was still burning. Now, I don't know how long cars burn. I guess it would depend why they're burned in the first place. But cars usually have a lot of flammable material in them. And everybody's ever seen a car burning on the side of the road, it can burn really hot, really fast, and then maybe in 20 minutes it can be out. So somebody must have come upon this car very quickly. And you wonder, well, if that's the case, then did they not see somebody driving out of there or walking away? It's still a mystery. We still don't know what the answer is to that. But the car was still burning when the fire department got there. They put it out, and nothing of any evidentiary value was found in it. Yes, they did drag both the canal you see over there and the lake or pond or whatever you want to call it on the right, and nothing was found.
So no tire tracks looking like another vehicle had,
not to my knowledge. And if we were listening to the interview with Donna Jean, we covered a lot. It's the most expansive interview she ever did, and she did a lot of media over the years. It's surely the most complete interview she did, and she didn't mention anything like that during the interview. I'm not saying it wasn't there. I just don't know.
Yeah. And, so like one would just like the person who's the investigator that's trying to think about all the different pieces of evidence here. So I'm assuming that the law enforcement team that was investigating this makes an assumption that she drove herself there and then lit the car on fire. Is that
what they, yes, they originally thought that Donna Jean, did this all herself.
Right.
And really, I mean, if you really want to get down to it, there's no proof that she didn't. Okay. She may have. I don't know how many people really believe that, but there's nothing saying that she didn't. But we do have these two men who were allegedly with her at the bar that night. Her ex-boyfriend said that she said on the phone that they were there. They've never been, to my knowledge, they've never been tracked down. They've never come forward. And Dorian's disappearance is fairly well known.
And they've never been questioned.
I don't know if I don't believe they've ever been tracked down. No, I don't think anybody knows who they are.
Right.
Or if they even exist. So, because as I don't remember the interview second by second, but I know that at one point, whether on the air or off the air, Donna Jean and I did talk about, could this have been an instance of what we might call confirmation bias, where the ex-boyfriend says he talked to her and she said that there were two guys over. So when investigators hear that, did they go to the bar and say, well, we heard she was with two guys? And so did that put that idea in the bartender's mind that, oh yeah, she was with two guys, but would that bartender have said that it could have been a she had they not said that? Putting things in people's minds. And, I just don't know how these people were questioned about these two men, because we only have one person's word on this.
Right. What I'm going to do is I'm hoping that everybody can hear me, because my screen is not going green. You can hear me, right, Ed?
You sound great.
Great. And Lenny, can I know that Dr. Jacobs kind is on as well. Can you hear me? Give me a little thumbs up if you guys can hear me. We can. Great. Oh, there's Dr. Kushner on. Great. Awesome. So here's my question, which I'm not kind of following this a little bit. Mm-hmm. Is if the car was on fire and it was relatively sort of like newly lit on fire, let's say, yes. There were no remains, there was no trace of her body anywhere in the car. Mm-hmm. When the fire department arrived, they found no one in the car. Mm-hmm. So
somebody drove it there.
Exactly. That's the disconnect part that makes it sound like, she didn't do that herself. Now, we've got a couple of people that are talking, that are watching us live. And Valerie TJ is saying, this doesn't make sense. She didn't set herself on fire. And Valerie's saying, I don't believe that. Like, I don't believe that she did this, that there's
and I believe that's most people do not believe that Dorian did this. I think it's circumstantial that she didn't. I don't know if there's any particular evidence that you could ever present in court that she didn't do it herself. But I think from a common sense, rational point of view, I don't know if many people out there at all that believe that she did this on her own. But I'm speaking from an evidentiary point of view. There's nothing that says that she didn't.
Exactly. So Valerie is continuing to say, so do you think that the two guys did this, or maybe a jealous ex? And,
well, there's certainly some more information that came out in the interview that I did with Donna Jean that, once again, I don't think that this was anywhere else, but she did talk about it in the interview. One of the other points was that, I think it was 2 days after this happened. So January 10th is that night. January 11th is the next morning when the car was found burning. Maybe 2 days later, January 13th, Donna Jean goes over to Dorian's house, which of course at that point, the fire had all been put out and everything. And who does she find going through the house? Dorian's ex-boyfriend, the very one who said he called that night and she said she was with two guys. He didn't live there anymore. Of course, it's hard to lock the door of a house that's been burned. I think the windows were out and everything. He was just going in and out of the house as if he owned it.
Interesting. So, it's really interesting that you say this, because Kathy Dow's, I think I'm saying that.
I know Kathy. Yeah, she's a listener of Unfound. I know she is. Yes.
So Kathy's saying that she's leaning more toward the ex. Anyway, no evidence so far that the two guys even existed. And Kathy's saying, I think the pets were locked in the room by the perpetrator. So that's
a possibility. Sure. That's a possibility.
This is a picture of the front The front.
That's the picture of the front door. And you can see parts of it are burned, but you have this wood chair over on the right side. I think it's made of some type of wood. Maybe it's plastic. Either way, you can see those chairs there are not burned at all, but other things are very burned. It could give you the idea that somebody was strategically trying to burn certain things. I don't know if this person was necessarily trying to burn down everything. Once again, I'm not an arson expert, but we have had some disappearances on Unfound where things were burned, cars were burned, and when people want to burn things to a crisp, they can do it. In this particular case, it just doesn't look like that was the plan.
Right, right. Valerie says how money is on the X as the prime suspect. Might have been trying to might have been trying to maybe not kill the animals. And Kathy's asking, Dr. Grace, you pronounced my last name correctly. My husband was Filipino. Okay, great. I'm glad. I'm always wanting to make sure that I'm pronouncing people's names correctly. Ed, who is this? Tell me who this.
This is. This would be the Hispanic. This would be the man, the Hispanic man that bartender described, that the bartender allegedly saw in the establishment the night, when Dory was there. The issue is that they saw Dory there, but they didn't see her leave with these guys, either this guy or the other guy. And nobody ever has said, yeah, we saw two cars in the driveway or anything like that out in front of Dory's place that night. So did she just pick these two guys up and give them a ride back to her house? Maybe.
Yeah.
But
was there another picture that you sent me of the other suspect?
Yeah, there's a picture of the other perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator, maybe. That guy is a Caucasian guy, and he is wearing a hat.
Okay.
And I think I did send that to you, but I realize it's maybe been a few months since I sent that to you. But those pictures can be found. The best place you can find them probably is charlieproject.org, and just do a search for Dory Ann Myers.
Yeah.
But these were the descriptions of these two guys, but nobody saw Dory Ann with these two guys. She might have talked to them that night, but nobody saw her leave with them. And how did they get, if they were at the bar, did they drive? And if that's the case, why wouldn't they take their own car to Dory's place? Because nobody said they saw another car out in front of Dory's. There's just a lot of loose ends here.
A lot of loose ends.
Even though we have a ton of information, we have pictures, we have descriptions, and we have a burned house, a burned car, and all this. There's still a lot of pieces in this puzzle that need
right.
to be, put in there.
Was the ex ever brought in for questioning? Valerie wants to know. And
he was questioned. He was questioned. He was a truck driver. He claims he was nowhere in the area that night. But I don't know how you'd ever get a hold of a driver's records from 14 years ago. I don't know if the police ever did that. And being that I have experience in this area with talking to the police at least once in a while, they're not going to give you that information anyway if they consider this an ongoing investigation. Even if I were to file a FOIA, I don't think you get that kind of information either. I really don't know how well they really looked into this guy or not. All I know is that he says he called. He says this is what she said. There's proof that call happened. But on the other hand, Donna Jean happened to run into him just walking into the house on his own that day, a place he had no right to be.
Right. Valerie says, did the ex say she was with the guys from the phone?
Yeah, in fact, his exact statement, from what I understand, and it's in a variety of places, including Donna Jean herself, is that he called, she picked up the phone, and he heard things going on in the background. He asked what was going on, and he said that she met two military vets at the bar, and they came back to her place. And that they were going to be staying over, and that she had pulled out the couch that turns into a bed, and they were going to be staying over. Now, later, of course, after the house burned and they put the fire out, they looked at that couch, and it does appear as if that couch was pulled out for a bed.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to read some of the other comments here that might be helpful to help us try to figure out what's going on here. Lenny says, this is Dr. Jacobskind from NSU. It appears that there's some of the surrounding area appeared staged. Any thoughts on that? Any type of forensic evidence available at the time? This is an area that interests me a lot to study, he says.
I wasn't there, but I will tell you what Donna Jean said, being that she can't be here to speak for herself. She did believe that some of it was staged because of the fact that it looked messy. The bottles and beer cans and things just being strewn around. She said it wasn't the way that even if Donna or Dorianne had a party over there, that she would leave things that way or would allow people to do that. Cigarette butts being where they were inside the house. It just, in her opinion, was not something that Dorianne would usually do and allow other people to do. So I didn't know Dorianne. Donna Jean did. She'd been to the house many times, grew up with her sister. I'm going to take her word to be the truth. So she kind of did believe that some things were staged.
Did the police ever question the sister?
Donna Jean spoke to the police. I don't remember the specifics of those conversations. I think I can speak for Donna Jean in saying that she was very suspicious of Dorianne's ex-boyfriend. I know what his full name is, but I will just use his first name here. His name is Joe. And but there was nothing that ever linked him to being close to that area on the night that this all happened.
Was that because he had an alibi?
There's just no evidence that he was.
Yeah.
In fact, just the month before, the way I remember it, the Dorianne went on a cruise with Joe, even though they were already broken up. And I think it was with her parents, or at least her mother. I don't know if her parents were still married. I don't remember, but it was some parental figures that she went with.
Yeah.
On a cruise, just like maybe a month, December of 2005. So it sounds like they had some sort of relationship, even though they weren't a couple anymore. Mm-hmm. But what also came out of that discussion was that it seemed that Dorianne might have had a new guy in her life. But Donna Jean, at the point that I interviewed her, could not remember this guy's name. What she remembers is he was not from the area. He was actually from the Gulf side of Florida, over by me. Actually, I think it was Naples or Venice, Florida, somewhere from there, North Fort Myers, someplace like that, down in that area. And the reason that is important is that while she was on this cruise with Joe, this guy actually came over to her house and stayed and took care of her pets. But this guy has never been identified, and he's never come forward after she disappeared. So, the tough part is that I continue to talk to Donna Jean after this. She was on the program, as I do with a lot of guests on Unfound. And I had actually talked about, because Donna Jean did not live, I think she lived up in Live Oak, Florida, which really not that far away. She said she had a lot of information and notes she took at the time in her attic, but she couldn't get to it because of her health and everything. And then she ended up passing away. So, it's kind of I'm not proud to say this, but I've been putting off, maybe contacting her husband or someone that maybe can get that information, because she led me to believe that the name of this new guy could be in that information.
Right. So I'm gonna read you a couple of different comments here. One from Angela Vincent. Whoever burned the car, you know Angela.
Uh-huh.
Whoever burned the car probably made a fast getaway. Makes me think there were two cars at the burned car site.
I think that we're going to have to believe that. I'm not saying somebody couldn't walk away from there, but it would be a decent walk to, an area where there are buildings or something. I think it makes sense that there probably was another car there, but that doesn't mean, that's a for sure. I continue to think about how quick it was that the call came in, that the firemen could get there and the car was still burning.
Right. And no body found there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not like it was completely burned. It seems as though it had just started. Kathy says there's a lot of info in this disappearance. Some of it could go in different directions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lori had a current boyfriend too that, you're mentioning here, that she had known a short time, who was supposed to be caring for the pets. So that's interesting. And we talked a little bit about the current boyfriend. Angela is asking, couldn't they check phone records to see if the boyfriend had made the call?
Well, the phone call, you mean the phone call in to say that the car was burning? I suppose they could have. I don't know if they did that. And I think you'd have to have a warrant to do that, which means you'd need probable cause. And what are you supposed to say when a guy has no proof that he was ever in the area? So how are you ever going to get a warrant to get that information? I don't know. It's a great idea, but I don't know how you would get that information. What we do know from Dory's records is that the call that he made does exist.
Yeah.
He said he called her at like 9:30, and that happened.
Right, that happened. Josh Enfinger, who happens to be one of our criminal justice undergrad majors, is saying he's aspiring to become a forensic investigator. And so he's asking, what are the staged factors that could help decide those important decisions?
Well, I'm not going to get. We don't talk theories on the program. I may write about them at the blog, and I don't know how far we want to go in that direction. But and I'm not saying I necessarily believe this.
Yes,
could see a scenario where if you believe that Joe is a decent suspect, that maybe that call when he talked to Dory didn't have anything to do about any of it. Maybe those guys weren't there at all. Maybe he made it all up, and then he went over there. And then the reason his story fits what they found at the scene is because he's the one that staged it. It's a possibility. There's no proof of that.
Right.
But the reason that the couch is pulled out is because Joe pulled it out, and then he tells, "Oh yeah, she told me on the phone that they were going to sleep over." That's a possibility. Once again, I'm not saying that Joe did it or anybody else did it, but that is a possibility that can't be ruled out given the evidence.
Yeah. Now, one of our viewers, who I think is one of your followers on the podcast, Valerie, makes this statement, and I'm going to read it out loud. And I do want to talk a little bit about it because this speaks to police community relations. It speaks to the public relations, the PR face of policing, right? She says the police are not helpful on most missing person cases. Now, what's your take on that? And then I want to talk about why is the public's perception that, which is just as damaging to policing if the statement is absolutely true. So what do you think?
Well, in Dorian's specific case, and then I'll move to the generalities of it, but on Dorian's specific case, to me, it doesn't, once again, having covered 170 disappearances now, it seems odd to me that their first reaction would be that Dorian did this all herself. Okay, so I'm not saying that because people are human, they have opinions, that they would actually voice that to her family and that the family would know that the police are thinking that is weird to me. That's me. I've never been in law enforcement, but there's that. So it seems to me to have a very knee-jerk reaction to something where there's no proof of anything that happened. All we have is a burned house and a burned car, and they're looking at her. So there's that. Now, as I will continue to say, I do have criticisms of law enforcement regarding missing persons cases, but I also understand that they are in a very, very difficult position. The problem is that the way I explain it many times, I've written about this, I've talked to on the live show about it, and I've written books about it, is that every disappearance looks the same at the beginning, okay? And the fact is, in most missing persons cases, the person comes back within a week. Most missing persons, when the report is found out, they show up a week later. It could be any sorts of circumstances. Kids going off to Las Vegas to elope, people going on a drug binge for a weekend, all sorts of different possibilities. The problem is, for that first 3 days or a week, the disappearances that are going to be solved in a few days look like the ones that aren't going to be solved for a long time.
Right.
I think what happens is that police officers, because they are human, they are not robots, they start taking things for granted at some point. They see so many disappearances where people come back in a few days that they think, oh, this is just one of those. Don't worry about it. The person will be back in a few days. Big deal. And then 2 weeks later, a month later, the person's still not back. And then it's like law enforcement is now playing catch up, trying to figure out, well, where was this person? Where was that person? Who saw her last and everything? And it's a very difficult position to be in.
And also, just in all fairness, there's a couple of things at play here. You mentioned confirmation bias earlier, where that's like the tunnel vision. That's,
yes.
I think I know, I have a theory on this case and that's it. And I'm not going to listen to anything else. I'm not going to be open-minded enough to listen to something else. But there's something here that Valerie is mentioning, and I'm so sorry. Valerie says, we've not heard from the police on my sister's case in years. And I'm so sorry about that. They don't return phone calls. So a couple of things at play here, like number one, Valerie's continuing to say my sister was missing a month before the report. So here's the thing. We can be more responsive. We could be more responsive as a police department, whatever police department it is, and also understand that every police department is going to be different. So I used to teach at the police academy, and I used to tell my recruits, you are the face of the police department. You are the face of the NYPD, but more importantly, you represent all law enforcement. And they're like, well, that's not fair. Why? That's a lot of pressure. But it's true, because when we talk about the public relations, the perspective of how do we view and perceive the police? Do we feel that the police is a responsive agency? Do we feel that the police are a unbiased group system? Do we feel that they are doing the very best they can for our case? That's going to vary for individual police officer to individual police officer. It's also going to vary from police department to police department. Would you agree?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I think the other issue, and this is something that I talked about very early on in Unfound's existence. I talked to a guy, his name is Tad Tobias. He's known as the no body guy. He's a prosecutor. He was a federal prosecutor that specialized in prosecuting murders where there were no bodies. And so because of that, he's become like an expert in missing persons cases as well. And I think what has happened like over the last 25 years is that law enforcement and the public have been so conditioned because they hear so much about forensics and DNA and fingerprints, and all these things, that's what people automatically default to when it comes to crimes, just any types of crimes, not just murders, but burglaries and rapes and everything else. And I think we've gotten to the point, it seems to me DNA is about 25 years old now, that a lot of law enforcement officials are stumped when that stuff doesn't exist. And you have to maybe do some of that more old school 1960s questioning people, and really, really, picking out their words and everything. Tad Tobias has said that's certainly a factor.
Yeah.
The issue is that most of the cases that Unfound has covered, disappearance, there are no forensics. There is no blood. There is no fingerprints. And that's why we mainly end up talking about what people have said. We talk about phone records. We talk about video if it exists. That's why we talk about disappearances in those terms, whereas 21st century investigation is the complete opposite.
Right. I'm so glad you bring that up, because in a lot of our undergrad courses, as well as in our master's in CJ, PhD in CJ even, we talk about this whole thing of what the media image is of police work. And you're absolutely right. So like before the hour is up, the case is solved. The perpetrator has not only been charged, but the trial has already happened, and all of that is a setup. It's a setup for the police, because the public and the citizens look at this and they think, well, you're not moving fast enough. Now, that's not always the case. That isn't always the case. What the truth is, and I really appreciate Valerie saying, I don't think all police officers are the same. She says, they are all different, and I really appreciate that. But sometimes, we have to take the black eye for, for the action or inaction of other police officers. But the other thing I wanted to bring up was, how much of this do you think is a blaming the victim mentality? So in other words, here's the victim, right? She's clearly a victim. And it's interesting that the conclusion that's drawn is that she did this to herself. Very similar in domestic violence cases as well, where
domestic violence. Well, she shouldn't have dressed like that. That's why that
assault. Exactly.
Exactly. It's absolutely horrible.
So again, it's a bias. It's a kind of a bias. It's not confirmation bias, which is about tunnel vision. And again, we talk about this in a lot of our classes, undergrad as well, as master's level. But how much of bias do you think played a role here?
In Dorian's, it's hard to say because I don't, once again, I did not know her personally. I don't know. Donna Jean and I never talked about if she had any addictions or anything like that, or she had any run-ins with the law. I don't remember any off the top of my head, and if I did, I would say so. I've seen bias in many of the cases that I've covered because many of the disappearances we covered do have to do with drugs. Women who might have been into prostitution and drugs, men who were criminals with criminal records. Even if we get into people who might have had issues with bipolar disorder, etc. And certainly there have been cases we've covered where police said, oh, that person has bipolar disorder. Oh, he'll be back. Or, as soon as, and this is the family talking, I'm not there. Okay, this is them telling me this. But I have no reason to think that they're lying, that they say, well, as soon as they found out that my sister was into drugs, they just didn't care about it anymore. Or she's just a junkie, and
right.
And you hear a lot about that. I'm not saying every case that we cover is like that, but it does come up quite a bit when we do cover disappearances with men and women who have had drug issues, just as an example.
Yeah. And that makes me think about it from a criminological perspective. It's just like, so what's the explanation for this crime? Let's say that she didn't do this to herself. Okay. Mm-hmm. So then is it a jealous ex-boyfriend? Was alcohol involved? I think I had asked you this question before, we came on the show. I had asked you about maybe her drinking because she had gone to the bar and then she went to another place after that. And you said that all you could go on is what her sister told you, which is that it was social drinking perhaps, but not a drinking issue, right? So from a criminological explanatory variable perspective, what explains this criminal act? It could be so many things. It could be psychological. It could be something that was maybe driven by addiction or substance use. It could be jealousy, could be emotion, could be behavioral. All of that definitely plays a role. But the thing is that if the police don't have the evidence, if the evidence isn't there, then there's something that the police can do. And I would really love to hear from Valerie on this as well. The police can do something. So they may not be able to solve the case, just like we see it on television, but there is responsiveness, there is communication, there is crisis intervention skills that can be employed that could make the families feel the police are interested and that this does matter. Would you agree?
I agree. I have to say, you're right. I hear too much about how police officers don't call families back. I hear a lot about that on the program. And, the issue that I think families are worried about is they don't want their loved one forgotten. If the police calls back and says, you know what, we just don't have anything new, I'm not saying that the families are going to be totally ecstatic about that, but at least they know that when they call, they get a response, and at least these people know in the law enforcement office who the family is, and I think that that's really all the families want. The problem is, another case that we covered for Unfound is the disappearance of Peggy and Patty McDaniel from Broward County or somewhere down your way, Fort Lauderdale, that area, Lauderdale, not Fort Lauderdale, Lauderhill or something like that. I'm kind of blanking on it right this second. Pompano Beach area. Now that comes to mind. But these two girls sisters were from Live Oak. They met these two guys in Live Oak. They were driven to Pompano Beach, and a murder was committed. And that murder is still unsolved to this day, 41 years later. When I came across that case and I talked to their mother, Joyce Ruvatuzo, who has become one of my favorite people, these two sisters disappeared. And when we covered the case in early 2017, I can tell you for sure that every single law enforcement agency in the state of Florida had completely forgotten these girls exist. If you went on Google and tried to Google their disappearance, this is two girls, 17 years old as I remember, disappeared on the same day. You could only find a picture of one of them, not both. That is how much they've kind of been forgotten in history, despite both of them disappearing at the same time. And an unsolved murder was attached to their disappearance. These are the types of things that families worry about. I mean, if you're going to forget about two girls who disappeared in connection to a murder, then anybody can be forgotten.
Right, exactly. And I think that this speaks to something that we had said earlier on, and there are so many different comments. Everybody, this is blowing up now, the comments section, and I want to be able to see if I can get to all of them. David Troxel, who's also a student in our program, he's an undergrad, CJ major, former military, says that's the challenge. The investigators need to keep an open mind, not be quick to judge the victim by their profession or their habits. And so Christine is weighing in here, Christine Broughton, and she's saying that her dancers are single moms just trying to support their children or put themselves through school. We know that there are certain victims who are more vulnerable to crime than others, you know, and again, you know, in our criminology classes, in our policing classes, criminal investigation classes, undergrad, as well as theories of crime in the PhD program in criminal justice, we talk about all of this stuff. And, you know, there was a time in criminology, in the criminological field, where there was a hell of a lot of victim blaming going on. You know, Menachem Amir, I believe, was one of the biggest, the theorist in sexual assault, that he blasted the victim. And we know that it's true that there are certain circumstances and situations that we might put ourselves in that we shouldn't be putting ourselves in. But that nevertheless doesn't give any perpetrator the right to harm someone, right? Period. Like
that's right.
I could wear a really nice chain and walk. Well, I'm, you know, like I'm not in New York anymore, but we used to talk about chain snatching. That doesn't happen anymore. Anyway, not down here. But, you know, you have the right, you have the privilege in this country to walk in the streets and do whatever you want to do, right? Like you can wear whatever jewelry you want, and that should be yours, not a perpetrator's that they feel, oh, well, you're wearing that, so I can take it. And then what happens is the blame shifts, and it shifts away from the perpetrator, you know, to the victim. So a lot of these things,
he shouldn't. Well, if he knew he was going to go through that area, he shouldn't have been doing that.
Exactly.
He shouldn't have driven that nice car through that neighborhood, or it's crazy.
Exactly. So you know what? We have like 7 minutes left before the program ends, but I really want to say thank you to all of the people who are, you know, engaged and interacting with us. One of the things that I was so drawn to you when we first talked and we first connected was this notion of working with families and being in that place where the families are frustrated, the families don't want to forget their loved one, and you're the one that brings their voice. You know, you're the ones that bring the voice of the family to the table. So if I may ask you this question, how do you deal with burnout in terms of the vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue, we call it in the psychological field? Compassion fatigue, it means you identify and you're empathic toward the family that you're working with, but after a while, how does that wear on you? And what do you do for self-care?
I've gotten this question before, and I think I always answer it the same way. These people do not come to me because I'm a psychologist or anything like that. It's not that I don't feel for these people. I do. I've never lost anybody to a disappearance. All of my family, Nobody in my family's ever been murdered or anything like that. So I can't identify with these people. But they don't come to me and to my assistants looking for, psychiatric help or something. They want answers to what happened. And what I try to do now, maybe I couldn't do that at the beginning after covering 10 or 20 disappearances, but now that we've covered 170, we have a wealth of information that we've collected. And what we try to do is use that database now of all of these disappearances that we've collected and apply that to the next case that we're going to cover and try to give those people new things to do, new ways to think about things. So we're always, goal-oriented, we're solution-oriented, we're not emotionally oriented. I don't think that, although we feel for these people, myself and all of my assistants, we deeply, deeply feel bad for all of these people, but that's not really what we do. We're here to try to find answers for them. So we're in a very objective, rational, logical part of the human mind. And
Yes.
we're trying to apply, it's no different, it's no different than an engineer, using physics to build a bridge. There isn't a lot of emotion that goes into that. It's just this. That's what we're doing too.
Right.
And that's what these people want. I mean, they aren't looking for a shoulder to cry on. They want answers. And so they want somebody that can, give them very rational, logical explanations of why things happen. Once again, after the experience, everything that we've gathered over the last 3.5 years, and apply it.
Right. Now, we've covered so much on this 1 hour live Facebook Live. I do want to say that, and I appreciate there was like 30 people that are viewing us right now, and a lot of your followers are on as well. So I just want to put in a little bit of a plug here for NSU's School of Criminal Justice and some of the undergrad programs to just kind of give you an idea of what some of our curriculum is, what some of our coursework looks like. So we have like legal perspectives in criminal justice, behavioral science. We have substance abuse. We also have child protection and juvenile justice. As I mentioned earlier, I'm currently teaching in summer school, and I'm teaching a policing class, criminal investigation class, constitutional issues class, survey issues in criminal justice for the master's program. So if you're listening to this, if you're within range of the shot of my voice and you can hear my voice, and you've listened to anything that we talked about tonight, and it's perked your interest, and it's gotten you a little bit curious about, I would love to know more about forensics, criminal investigation, criminal justice, policy making. A lot of the stuff we talked about tonight is policy issues. And how can we become a better face of policing? How can we better serve the people? We're certainly not social workers, as you mentioned. We're not social workers, but at the same time, a little bit of crisis intervention goes a long way. A little bit of communication goes a long way. Call people back, respond to the families. These are issues that we do talk about at both the undergrad level as well as the master's level, and we attract PhD candidates in criminal justice who are the executives, the police executives of the future, as well as the researchers in criminal justice of the future. So, Ed, going to give you the last word. We got 2 minutes left.
Okay.
You got it.
Thank you for having me on the program today. I'm just, we could have probably gone for hours, Grace.
Yeah.
Totally. Hopefully we can do this again sometime soon. But just to let you know a little bit about the program, Unfound, its new episodes come out every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So we will have an episode coming out tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow's episode, I interview all of my assistants so everybody can get an idea of what goes on behind the scenes and how everything works and how we all get along and how we manage everything that is Unfound. You can find Unfound on Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. We have the Facebook group, the discussion group. We have the Facebook page. We're on Instagram. We have a YouTube channel, which one of my assistants is doing a spectacular job with that, the Unfound Podcast YouTube channel. We have like 1.7 views now there, 1.7 million views. And we have the new website, unfound.com. We have a lot of different information there, a lot of links to a lot of different things
Great.
to do. So there you go.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. And if you couldn't get all of that, I put in the comment box Unfound. Just Google Unfound and Ed Densel, and you'll be able to, link up with all of the various mediums that he has going on. I want to thank my two bosses are on, Dr. Tammy Kushner. Actually, my dean is on as well, Kimberly Durham, and my other boss, the associate dean of the School of Criminal Justice, Marcelo Castro. He's under a pseudonym, but he is on. And I want to also thank Dr. Lenny Jacobs-Kind and all of the people from recruitment and marketing who have been on and helpful. Jessica Rodriguez has been a big help with marketing this. And it sounds like if we do have some good feedback, then we can definitely come on again and do this again and again and again and do a series on this to whet the appetite of all of our forensic scientists that are out there.
I'd love to come down and speak to some of your students sometime. That's
great. That absolutely. And I just want to say one more thing. Visit NSU's Fischler College and School of Criminal Justice website. It's nova.edu. And actually, if you just look in the chat box, Kristen, thank you, Kristen. She put that in the comment box as well. So Ed, be safe. Thank you to all of the viewers that have been watching us. Also, please be safe. Take care of yourselves. And we'll definitely do this again, and maybe we'll have a series out of it. Who knows?
Great.
We'll see.
I'm always ready to talk.
All right. Take care. Good night, everybody.